I'm Vladimir Klitschko, and I'm addressing the entire world to stop this war that Russia has started and is happening in the heart of Europe. There's no time to wait, because that's going to lead into the humanitarian catastrophe. You need to act now to stop Russian aggression with anything you can have now. In an hour or by tomorrow it's gonna be too late. Please get into action now. Don't wait. Act now. Stop this war.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this special edition of There's a Will. I'm Will Richardson, and with me in the studio is Miriam Shaded, an expert on refugees and the refugee crisis that we have on the border in Poland now. And Iwo Bender is with us in the studio, longtime journalist and producer of television, and also Nicholas Richardson, newsreader, journalist, and NATO expert, doing programs for TVP. Okay, the situation is changing as we sit here. This is a Saturday. We're sitting in the studio. The situation is changing all the time. During the break, we've been monitoring some of the news. What's the latest that you have, Ivo?
Well, as we know, on the first day of the invasion, the Russians attempted to capture an airport which is located to the northeast of Kiev in order to use it as a staging area for an assault on the capital. And that was repulsed by the Ukrainian forces. And actually, tonight, we have reports that there was another attempt. There was actually by the Russian forces to take an airport which is to the southwest of Kiev, and that was also repulsed by the Ukrainian forces. So it seems that the plan for a quick decapitation movement against the Ukrainian government has been thwarted once again.
Yeah, a very brave man, Zelensky, to stay there. Interesting fact about him, and lead the country, unlike in Afghanistan, where the leader immediately ran with his money. Ridiculous man. But our fault picking him, I guess. But not our fault, but our government's. But looking at Mr. Zelensky, is in fact, life, as Thomas Hardy said, it's the little ironies, right? Nicholas will know, having been a reader of Thomas Hardy in school, as I was, but for sure. But it looks as if showbiz has taken over reality, because, in fact, Zelensky, President Zelensky, was playing the character of a school principal, I believe, who becomes president of Ukraine, and then in reality he became president of Ukraine, which is a most extraordinary thing. It's almost it's too close to the bone, really. But the situation right now is he stayed in Kiev, and as Ivo's been telling us, this latest report about the airport, many things will be changing. There's a fog of war, disinformation, and it's hard to know exactly what's going on, except that we know for sure that the Russians expected a quick victory, and they have not had it to this point, and they have sustained fairly heavy losses from what we can tell. A lot of tanks being taken out, a lot of jets being taken out, and the Ukrainian Air Force, with its 70-odd, or several dozen, if you will, jets, is still operational, which is amazing. So now they've got logistical problems, and this is what a lot of the military commentators were saying would happen, is that if this thing got sustained, we've now, the Russians will have trouble resupplying, which means ammunition, which means also food. And there's a story I had from Kiev earlier today of people, Russian soldiers, knocking up doors to ask for food because they haven't eaten for 24 hours and longer. And people saying, go away, we don't want you here. What do you? And then the Russian soldiers being surprised because they thought they're there to liberate. Now, this is almost comical at this point. You know, it reminds me of, and there is always in war some kind of, there's always humor, as we know, because life goes on. But even in the midst of great drama, of course, comedy is never far away. And so those 2 points, I think, show a very human side of what's going on. And, but I think right now we have to look at how long can Ukraine hold out? How can they be resupplied with what they're going to need, which is plenty of missiles, surface-to-air missiles and tank missiles, as well as small arms and ammunition for those small arms. They were handing out Kalashnikovs in Kiev. I know yesterday because I talked to somebody who had just gone out and got one. And there were long queues for citizens taking arms themselves. And I also was told by the same source in Kiev, a journalist there, that the forward groups of saboteurs and special operations people were being massacred in the streets by a combination of Ukrainian forces, police, and civilians, just surrounding these people and taking them out, because they're all armed. I mean, tens of thousands of people, ordinary citizens, are armed with Kalashnikovs now. This is not going to be something, this is that you can easily take over and eliminate. There are Kiev is a massive city alone, just Kiev, but there are all the other cities that we know about. Kharkiv, which is under assault, Odessa, which is under assault. We don't know about Lviv yet, but these things are going on as we speak. There is street fighting in Kiev, but checking during the break, I did notice that if there is a Fox Live, as well as a Fox Live camera on downtown, as well as a multi-paneled camera shot by the Ukrainian government showing a peaceful downtown. So they have not, there is no firefighting in the center to this point. And we know the government is still there. Now, the question is, how do the Russians resupply, and have they extended themselves too far, and what will the next few days hold? Your comments from our NATO expert.
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, obviously, if the Ukrainians can continue their sort of guerrilla, is probably a bit unfair, but their sort of guerrilla activities, because clearly that is where I think the best hope for the future lies, that NATO continues to supply weaponry to Ukraine, presumably from Poland, because that'll, if the Ukraine forces can sort of defend their western border, so
well, they've got a problem. They've got a problem. But you raise, and let's look at that strategy going forward. Now, what can you do to defend yourself? You can always fall back to the southeastern corner. Why? South of Lviv. You can make a defensive line at Lviv, but then south you've got all the borders along going down to Romania, and there are mountains there. These are impenetrable mountains. There are not a lot of roads there, and resupply can take place through there, and it's a very good place to make a resistance stand. The southeast corner of Ukraine. Very hard to get these people out if they get a concerted, if they have a plan, which I bet they do, and they can be helped by special forces from NATO as well in these areas, not to mention the bordering countries, including Poland.
Well, I mean, the key to all of this is to what extent NATO is prepared to be involved behind the scenes. Part of the problem is, of course, that NATO has been saying, oh, well, we can't, Ukraine's not in NATO, we can't get involved too much. And this has just, unfortunately, encouraged Putin, I think.
Well, they can resupply whether
really,
they're
I mean,
troops.
there are two... I think
there can be little doubt. We have special operations people
well, of course
there
there are,
now.
yes, and we are supplying weapons.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is part of there are two issues on all of these occasions. One is the military issue. You know, is the Russian army now, are their forces bigger than the Ukrainian forces? Can they win? And then there's a wider picture, if we look at what happens next, as to what extent it's a battle of wills. And Putin is gambling. Like, I know we're always very wary of drawing these parallels with Adolf Hitler. But essentially, if you do look at the parallels, when the German forces reoccupied the Rhinelands before World War II, the German army apparently said to Hitler, look, we are not ready. The French army is huge. You will destroy the German army in this operation. And Hitler said, yes, you're right, but they won't fight. And that's what happened. And I wonder to what extent Putin is looking over the last few years, looking at NATO, looking at the sort of leaders we have in the West, and making the conclusion they have so many other things on their mind which are so irrelevant that they don't have the will to fight anymore.
Well, you're talking about these political infighting.
Yeah, I'm talking about I'm talking about the other actions in other
and focus on unimportant issues.
Yes, and other other contexts,
less
where
important
our
issues.
leaders have shown their inability to respect their nation's history collectively. I'm not pointing to any one country. Inability to reflect defend their nation's culture, even, dare I say it, inability or unwillingness to defend the nation's borders. And this is part of the problem. So, and it's a similar calculation, I think, that President Xi will be making China. Are they dealing with people who on paper are much wealthier, much stronger, but in reality lack the will to fight? And I think the key to all of this, actually looking forward, is to make sure that NATO now really does a lot to bolster forces in the Baltic republics and in Poland in this whole border. Because that is the
Let's
only...
talk about borders, and I want to go to Harold on borders
Yes.
as well. Harold von Kursk in Tallinn. I want to go to him in a second. But the border is crucial. Last summer I was walking along the border with Belarus in July, and you could easily walk across. There was no wall, there was no fence. You could just walk across it. I mean, eventually you'd probably get picked up. I mean, you would get picked up by the police at some point on the other side, but whichever way you cross, but you could do it.
Yes.
There was no real defensive border there, and certainly not even in the Balvasia forest. But we have to let's look forward to protecting these borders, because a war and the Russians being right on the border, as bellicose as they've proven themselves to be, threatens the EU. There is no way around that. And that threatens a larger world war called World War III. We are threatened with that now. And I don't care if people don't want to admit that out loud or not, because it's true. And history shows it's true. Now, and especially someone like Harold sitting up in the Baltics where he is, you've got Kaliningrad, which is a fortified armed camp on the edge of Poland and Lithuania on the Baltic, which people should look at and read about. And then you've got Belarus, and they're very easy to roll tanks out from Kaliningrad and Belarus and meet up and cut off the Baltics. Harold, what do you think about that, and are people worried about it?
No, not really. Reinforcing NATO troops and arms in the Baltics is essentially a waste of time, because there's no strategic advantage for Putin to threaten Europe via the Baltics. And if you install 2 F-35s in Estonia, as the Americans did this week, it's meaningless. It's a gesture. And I understand, of course, NATO has to show solidarity for Estonia, and we welcome any support. But Estonia isn't in the line of fire. The main thing is actually to move as many troops eastward in Central Europe, add at least 40,000 NATO troops in Poland, to show the Russians, to show Putin in particular, whose hubris knows no bounds, that the West is serious about defending its eastern flank. That's the only thing which will act as a means of deterrence against Putin, who is essentially still reliving his anguish from being made fun of in a Russian NTV TV show in mid-90s called The Kukla Show, where Putin was shown to be a silly puppet. And he reacts so strongly and so viscerally on a primitive, emotional, and Napoleonic level that this complex was only inflamed further in 2014, when his puppet thug, Yanukovych, was thrown out by the courageous Orange Maidan revolution. And Putin has been aiming to reconquer and bring Ukraine back into the Russian fold ever since.
Very good. Thank you for that comment, Harold. So good to know that you're not worried, but I am for a little bit about the future. But I think your summation is very apt for right now. Don't you agree, Ivo?
Well, I think that Poland has been sounding the alarm about the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and about the real intentions of Russia, and we were basically told, along with other countries that had the dubious pleasure of being parts of the Warsaw Pact and, you know, liberated themselves in the early 90s from the Soviet dominance. We were told by the West that, oh, you know, you have these grievances, historical grievances. Russia is now different. We need to do a reset, etc., etc. So, in a sense, you know, our opinions were vindicated, but it's a bitter satisfaction. You know?
It's a bitter satisfaction, but Poland has, of course, the legacy of Katyn and the murder of the Polish officers by the Stalinists, blamed on the Nazis.
I mean, every single Polish family suffered from...
not to mention Siberia.
I mean, my cousin was sent to Siberia in 1940. She returned in 1956, and she was lucky to be alive. So every single Polish family has that. So oh, yes, you have those historical grievances. No, it's...
they're not grievances, they're realities.
It is the reality.
The realities, aren't they?
And the good thing is that the West is slowly, but is waking up to this grim reality and this actual danger of, as you said, World War III, if this aggression is not being stopped.
Well, you don't want to overstate
now.
it because, you know, I mean, you don't want to overstate it, say World War III, but my goodness, you have to think about it. We've all grown up in our lives with the threat of nuclear annihilation. We thought when the Russian Federation broke up, that there'd be some relief there. By doing business with Russia, by doing business with China, we might change their minds. That hasn't worked.
But by doing business with these folk, unfortunately, all we've done is made them wealthier.
We made them wealthier.
We've made them, you know, I mean, for example, figures, very rough figures, but Russia receives about $700 million a day from its sale of oil and gas, I think, to Europe. Which is
what
fine.
do you do going?
And if you cut it off, okay.
Yeah.
But Putin has been prepared for this. But apparently Russia has $630 billion of reserves. So very, all things being equal, on a very simple calculation, he can go for 18 months without receiving another dollar for oil, in theory. I mean, so he's been preparing for all this.
Yeah, and the people are used to being shoved down and told what to do, so they can throw everything into the military. See, the one thing the Germans didn't have was oil. That was what a lot of the, thank goodness, they didn't get through Stalingrad, but toward the oil fields, what they were going for. But the one thing the Russians do have is an endless supply of oil, but they don't have an endless supply of people, as we mentioned in the previous segment. Miriam, the human cost of such a thing that's going on right now, of such an invasion, such a murderous attack on a free country, what is the human cost?
We can't count that yet. That's the problem, because the war is still on, and
but refugees,
refugees, yeah, yes, but as we've seen before in World War II, there was 6 million human deaths in Poland.
You're talking about the Jews
and
Poles who were murdered.
Because it's 3 million of Poles, 3 million who were murdered.
Let's call it murder. It
murdered.
Was. Yeah.
So 3 million Poles and 3 million Jews in Poland.
In
so
Poland
this itself, and Putin is going for the civilians now. So he's gonna murder again. He already done it. So we need to react and protect the people for sure. We need to protect Poland as well, because if he doesn't care about the attacks right now, he's not going to care about invading all the Baltic countries. He wants to connect Belarus with Kaliningrad. That's one thing. Second, he wants our uranium resources that we have by the Baltic Sea. Third, I don't know if we can get help.
Also in Ukraine. Ukraine's one of the leading uranium producers. Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to get help from Germany, but because Germany wants to put their hands on Śląsk in Poland, because we have a lot of natural resources.
That would be
southwest
Poland.
Yes, southwest.
Which was traditional. It went back and forth. It's not traditionally German. It's actually been Czech, German, and Polish mostly.
So we need to concentrate to, as well, help the Ukrainians, but we need to be prepared for an attack. We don't know in how many days there's going to be help from NATO. Because, you know, they have to fly in with all the armors.
They can't fly in. There's no...
So
unless they're parachuting things in.
We need to start preparing
there are ways
already.
There are ways in that we can't talk about here. There are ways in. There are ways in. They're moving things in. But let's just say
as
through
quickly
this,
as possible,
the
they should
possible
move.
borders. Yeah.
It doesn't cost them a lot to move things into Poland. They can do it right now. We need to act as fast as possible with that.
Thank you, Miriam. That's very good. The human cost is going to be, is actually immeasurable. It always is. But certainly in the case of refugees coming across the borders, all the borders, not just Poland, but all the borders from Poland to Romania, and the cost, of course, in human lives on both sides.
Indeed.
On both sides. Because there are a lot of these, we have to remember that a lot of these Russian soldiers probably don't know why they're fighting.
No.
They've just been told to go there.
Exactly.
Or they've been told lies about denazification. I mean, to us, it's laughable, it's ridiculous, it's absurd, it's like some farce. But to these simple, soldiers brought up on propaganda, it becomes something that they, at least if they don't believe, they believe that they are in the army and they better go do what they're told, right? It's the old, I was just following orders, yeah?
Exactly.
And that's what we're up against.
No, we have
right
to,
now.
And I'm talking of NATO.
I say we are up against it because
but
sitting in Poland,
if we don't stiffen our resolve, and I'm talking about the NATO countries now, and actually physically do something, then we will be in this position.
Can I interject here?
Yes, please do.
Harold, please jump in.
I want to say that I don't share Miriam's pessimism regarding the human cost in Ukraine, because I believe that since Russia regards Ukraine and Putin regards Ukraine as essentially part of Mother Russia, so to speak, I do not believe he is anxious to use carpet bombing, for example, on Ukraine the way he did in Chechnya or in Syria, where there was no regard for the human population. I believe Russia's ambitions in Ukraine are very clinical. Install a puppet government, control military bases, the airport, and communication, and the people will live as they did before.
No, that's
Russia
not the case.
wants to
It's not happening.
Ukraine
I have close ones in
into
Ukraine right now in Kiev, and they're hiding. They are being afraid that they're going to be killed. I'm stressed for them that they are going to be killed because he's going on and killing civilians. He's killing Christians. He said he's not gonna do. He's gonna protect the Christians in the world, and he's not doing it. That's the other case. He's attacking the Christians.
Well, we don't have the statistics of how many civilian casualties there are, but there hasn't been.
Well, because it's a fog of war, we can't possibly know. But what we do know is he's launched. Wait a second. What we do know is he's launched. Hold on a second, please. I'll let you come back. What we do know is he's launched a massive invasion of a free country to which he was not invited to the party. Okay? Wrong on every count. So I think, and after his speech, his previous speech, I think giving him any credit whatsoever as being any kind of humanist is ridiculous.
I'm not giving him credit, I'm just stating facts.
Yeah.
I'm saying that he's treating Ukraine differently from the way he treated the Chechens and certainly the Syrians at the beginning of those conflicts.
Well, that's perhaps possible.
Send the Chechens in. Kadyrov, he's sending. They're not gonna be human in any way to Ukrainians.
Well, let's say let's just say, Harold, that's the best case scenario. Let's hope that what you're saying is a calculation. Let's hope. We can hope, but we have to at the same time prepare for the worst. And right now the situation is, horrific. There's no other word to describe it. It's horrific that he is invading this country and carrying on his plans from 2014. I went to Maidan. I was there in November of the 2014 when it took place, and I also went back right before the Russians invaded, and this feels a lot the same back, but on a much bigger. The build-up to this felt the same as that build-up to me and to the people I talked to on the ground in Ukraine. So I would say that I wouldn't put anything past him, and I can tell you that in the highest circles of government, they're worried about tactical nuclear weapons being used, at least as an example, to quell unrest at a certain point. How that would be employed and to what targets, no one knows. But it is possible, and also Finland and Sweden, as I believe, have expressed a need or desire at this moment to enter into NATO, and they've been threatened.
Exactly.
Is that not true?
It is true. And this is we're dealing with somebody who's now lost in his own paranoia. I mean, you restart at the beginning of the program this rather bizarre broadcast on Monday. He looked unwell. He was slumped in his chair in a corner with his old 1990s telephones. It was not impressive television. If I was the Russian leader and I were going to this great mission to save brother Russians as he sees them, I'd have
brother Christians, as Miriam said.
Or brother Christians. I'd have had a slightly more impressive TV setup. I mean, the man is clearly unwell now.
Well, it was his Mein Kampf speech, wasn't it?
It was, and he's clearly, and the trouble with these people is he's because of COVID, he's been in this bubble in the Kremlin. He sees nobody. You see over these pictures, even meeting his own security apparatus, the other side of a football-sized room. I mean, the poor man is now lost in this sort of bunker mentality. And at this point, for him, he doesn't think the way we think. There is no rationality anymore. It's about achieving this objective by fair means or foul. And I think this is a point, and I see where I would...
We've got to end here.
Yes,
I give you the last word.
Yes, well, I would take issue with Harold in that I think every Baltic state is very important, because once one falls, then he thinks that NATO won't respond. So it's very important. It's not about, oh, Estonia is not strategically important. It's about the concept. Are we, as NATO is saying to Putin, thus far and no further?
My point, Nicholas, is that NATO cannot defend the Baltics. It's impossible. Russia is on the doorstep, and unless you're going to install 100,000 troops in the Baltics, Russia can just walk in.
Well, you just made the case that I put earlier, but we have to end there. Harold von Kursk, thank you very much for your cogent comments from Tallinn, and Godspeed to you there. We hope that nothing will be going on there, and we look forward to welcoming you to Warsaw, Harold, at any time. You're always welcome.
I'm on my way.
As we're welcoming Ukrainian friends and colleagues here, personally, I am, and I know some of you are too, and even putting them up. So that's all we have for this edition of There's a Will. Harold von Kursk in Tallinn, thank you very much. Miriam Shaded in the studio, Iwo Bender in the studio, and Nicholas Richardson, our NATO expert, in the studio. I want to thank everybody for watching. We'll be back next week with another show, or maybe even sooner. Let's see. I don't know if I'm on my way to Ukraine. We shall see. Not my first war, and I hope if I do go, it will be my last to see in this kind of way. All right. Godspeed to everyone, and stay well.